Welcome to the Health and Longevity Kitchen. Today I'm sharing our first recipe, and it's going to be an upgraded version of Jello. And this is one of the most common recipes that I recommend to my patients for tissue healing in general, to repair a leaky gut, to improve the strength of their bones, to help them feel and look a little bit younger, and many other reasons. Not only can this delicious treat or meal be good for your health in general, it's also great for people who want to get fit, build better muscles, build stronger tendons, and just generally have a better sense of being grounded in their body. This upgraded version of old school Jello, or what I like to call Jello goodness, can be made in a lot of different ways. You can make it as a dessert. You can make it as an after-meal treat. You can use it as a pre or post-workout meal. You can use it to replace a smoothie. And believe it or not, you can even use it to replace bone broth. Although I'm a clinician, I'm also a patient, and as a patient with Crohn's disease and the usual complex chronic inflammation that goes with autoimmunity, I've even fasted on Jello goodness, or G goodness, for 4 days in the past, and it's actually helped me stabilize the autoimmune response, help my body repair tissue as quickly as possible, and also keep me from eating anything that might be triggering. Now, obviously we haven't met, and as a clinician, I'm not offering you this as medical advice. I'm just sharing my experience, some science, and a really great recipe. So today I'll be making the Jello goodness in 3 ways. First, in a jar without any particulate matter or sediment or seeds. Second, in the jar with all that sediment and some herbal tonics mixed in, so it's kind of like a little bit of a vitamin or supplement boost. And third, as what we call sheet Jello or sheet G goodness, which in another video we're going to add some chocolate to roll it up and turn it into a really fantastic kind of dessert snack and something that's going to boost your mood and sense of well-being. Before we get started, I'll just introduce myself quickly. My name is Dr. Michael Smith, and I've been a frontline clinician for 28 years. My focus in medicine is combining traditional Chinese medicine and functional medicine, and my focus as a clinician is on complex autoimmune disease, trauma, and addiction, and kind of where they intersect with people who've been living with chronic illness and pain and exhaustion for decades. The reason I recommend pretty much everyone I meet, especially all of my patients, make this kind of Jello or Jello goodness is because we have to repair the damage. And when we are trying to improve our health, it's one thing to try and make the illness stop, but that's just to focus on not being sick. What happens if we decide to add another dimension to that and focus on being as healthy, as whole, as fit, and as happy and playful as we can be? And it's, there's kind of a martial arts metaphor that if you're in a tricky situation, you don't want to be blocking, you want to be taking advantage of the situation in any way you know how and end the problem so that there can be peace. So maybe a martial arts metaphor there. I would just encourage anyone to, especially with chronic illness, to do everything they can to get as healthy as they can, not just defend themselves and stop themselves from being sick. For this recipe, you're going to need obviously a stove, a pretty big pot, some lemon juice, lime juice, or even fresh citrus, some really raw, organic, unpasteurized honey if you can find it, a good blender. You can use a food processor as well. You're going to want a bowl for the usual moving things around, some tea, preferably something that has red, purple, or dark berries in it. Some cranberry and or pomegranate or other kinds of red, purple, or darker juice. Some water that's at room temperature or a little bit warmer, good measuring cup. Some fresh ginger, some raspberries if you can, organic if you can, and or blackberries or both. I like a combination of both. And of course you're going to need some animal gelatin. There's no vegetarian or vegan way to make this kind of food, unfortunately, at least not yet. And I like to add something called camu because it's really potent antioxidant and full of vitamin C. And sometimes I'll also throw in a little bit of lion's mane, and I'll talk about that in a moment. So I usually use frozen berries, and I just put them in a measuring cup and cover them with some warm water, which thaws them out and then allows me to make sure I have about 1 liter overall of fluid and food, just because the proportions are important when you're using gelatin. Once the berries have had a chance to thaw out, Then I just sit them in the pot and let them simmer. Now I don't want them to get hot or to boil them. I just want them to be at a gentle rolling simmer. We're going to learn about polyphenols in a minute, and you just don't want to heat them up too high. So as I go through making this recipe, I'm going to be speaking a little bit about the ingredients, how they affect you in terms of physiology, how they benefit your health, and why the ingredient mixture is set up the way it is. For example, we're starting off here with basically a pot full of berries, and if you're doing anything you can about your health, you want to keep your fruit sugars and other sugars low. So you'll see when we look at some of the other ingredients, we've actually planned this out to balance the effect it's going to have on your blood sugar. And I'll share some other options as well as we go through the recipes. So if you don't want to have a lot of actual fruit in your Jello, or you can get the benefits in other ways. When you complete this recipe, you'll have about 1 cup servings, and that's optimal so that you can have 1 or 2 cups of Jello a day. Now, when you're looking at this in the sense of calories, it's about 60 calories per cup serving. And of that, about 40 calories are from the fruits and sugar, and about 20 calories are from the protein in the Jello. Now again, you can reduce the amount of fruit sugar by using berry powders and things like that. So you may not know this about things like ginger and garlic, but if you want to get the maximum benefit out of them, when you chop them up, if you take the edge of your knife and actually just squish them flat until you can see the liquid coming out, and again this is true for ginger and garlic, then you're actually going to activate some of the healthy compounds that are in those foods. So one of the ingredients is to have about 4 cups or a liter of tea. And again, I'm using a kind of tea called Wild Berry Zinger because I want all of the ginger and all of the polyphenols and all of the active ingredients, like what's called ellagic acid we'll learn about in a moment, that actually happen to be in berries. So as the tea is steeping, let's talk a little bit about ellagic acid. So in the raspberries and the blackberries and cranberries and some wild strawberries, the darker and the richer and the more wild and organic the better, all of those foods contain ellagic acid. Now ellagic acid is in a way like an informational substance in your body that directs an activity. And unfortunately, as we get older, the ellagic acid production in our body goes down, especially after 40, especially after 65, 70, and for women, especially after menopause. So ellagic acid has this ability, again, to direct an activity in the body to help the collagen matrix, and these little fingers that I'm putting up here are meant to be filaments of collagen that reach out and connect to each other as your body repairs membranes and muscles and tendons and bones and things like that. So this thing I'm doing with my fingers is meant to represent a collagen matrix, and how well organized this is dependent on ellagic acid, vitamin C, and obviously how much free collagen you have available in your body. Now collagen's a little bit complicated, and I'll talk to that in a moment, but the thing I want you to just be aware of is that without that compound and some vitamin C, ellagic acid and vitamin C, your body actually can't repair tissue in a very organized way. So we end up creating more scar tissue, more thinned out membranes, more striated membranes, and other things that just make us sometimes feel weaker, stiffer, and or in pain. There's also a lot of research on ellagic acid as something that's good for dealing with epigenetic signaling or gene expression, which is something I focus a lot in my practice, is epigenetics, because epigenetics controls gene expression. And if you can change the way genes express themselves on the inside of your cells, they won't turn on diseases. They may be less likely to turn on cancer. And this is in the way you can describe how ellagic acid, vitamin C, and other compounds actually turn down the possibility or probability of your body to produce the activity we call cancer. So ellagic acid, believe me, especially after 40, is one of your best friends, and dark, rich colored berries is the way to go. If there are reasons for you to avoid fruit entirely, you can get ellagic acid as a supplement. It's just not easy to find yet. So now that your tea is simmering, your berries are simmering, you have all of your ingredients ready, the next thing to do is bloom your gelatin. Because I'm making over 4 liters or quarts of fluid, I'm going to need a pretty significant amount of gelatin, and it's usually about 2 heaping tablespoons of gelatin powder per liter or quart. So I'm going to use 9 just to make sure, and in fact I kind of like my Jello goodness a little bit thicker than the wobbly Jello, so it's up to you. So when you're a healthy young person, your body's about 35% collagen. As you get older, especially if you don't exercise a lot, you can get down to about 25% collagen throughout your whole body. When you get quite old or frail, or you're recovering from a chronic illness of some kind where your body's been through a wasting process, you can get below 20% collagen throughout the weight of your whole body. Below 20% is really bad. 35% is really good. There's about 25 different kinds of collagen in the human body. 5 of those types are pretty commonly used therapeutically. I'm not going to get into all of those details in this recipe video, but I just wanted you to be aware that the most important structures in your body and the most consistently measurable benefits to your long-term health outcomes, quality of life, and longevity is the actual percentage of collagen inside your body. When I think of this from a traditional Chinese medicine point of view, you could say that the collagen or gelatin that we can get from the food in our diets is a thing that replenishes the qing, or the essence of your physical body. So as I stir up the blooming gelatin, I just want to speak to another fun little science fact about cooking. And that has to do with how collagen and gelatin are hydrophilic, or that they like to absorb water and then absorb water and then absorb water. And this is important because the more hydrophilic, or the more water the gelatin in your diet has absorbed, the easier it is to actually pass across the mucosal barrier of your small intestine, where you absorb that into your body, and in fact where your leaky gut is leaking. So if you're trying to repair a leaky gut and get that collagen into your bloodstream and into your bones and muscles and brain, you want to make sure that it's absorbed a lot of water first, which is why bone broth is considered to be one of the best things for you, because the gelatin from the bones is in something you could drink as a broth, whereas Jello is a little bit thicker. But luckily, once you swallow the Jello, it becomes liquid because of your body temperature, and then it absorbs into your body almost as fast as bone broth. But you're also getting a lot more density mixed in with the ellagic acid and vitamin C and other things that just make it work physiologically for you a lot better. So let's put everything together, warm it up, and then we'll put it into our jars so we can have some Jello goodness as soon as we can. So there's a liter of berries simmering here in the pot. Now there's going to be a liter of organic cranberry juice, which is very low in sugar for a fruit juice. A nice heaping tablespoon or 2 of ginger. Ginger, I think, is one of the most underrated medicines in the world. I would say it's comparable to things like ginseng, ashwagandha, reishi mushrooms, and other medicinal foods that we may all think are lifesavers. But believe it or not, simple, good old-fashioned kitchen ginger can be a bit of a lifesaver. In the short term, it improves nausea, improves digestion. It's actually used in 2 or 3 different ways in Chinese medicine as a medicine we put in formulas for people to have every day. It can reduce inflammation throughout your body, and it's known very specifically to help prevent many different kinds of cancer. Now, I'm not making that as a claim as a medical treatment for disease. I'm just saying populations who eat a lot of ginger are less likely to get certain kinds of diseases in their communities. Our berry tea, and I'm going to leave the bags in there until it's time to blend it up. I'm going to add a tablespoon of Ceylon cinnamon, and it's important that it's the Ceylon cinnamon. The cassia cinnamon is not really that good for your liver, but cinnamon is one of the most interesting medicinal plants that's just considered a spice and kind of a fun thing, which is important especially today and especially for this recipe, because cinnamon can actually improve your insulin sensitivity, so your body's response to any kind of sugar is actually better. Cinnamon reduces inflammation, especially in the brain, so it can help with preventing certain kinds of neurological conditions, and if you're at risk for that, well, maybe check out how cinnamon might fit into your diet a little bit more often, especially the right kind. Another thing I like to add is called camu camu, and it's a really unique fruit powder that has 60 times the vitamin C of an orange, kind of gram for gram. So if you want to make sure that ellagic acid is activated, there's lots of vitamin C for all of the many reasons vitamin C can be helpful, then I would just encourage you to throw a tablespoon of camu camu powder in there, and it is going to make it more tart, so you may want to add a little bit more honey or maple syrup when it's time to decide how sweet you want it at the end of the recipe. So I'm going to remove those bags of tea. Stir in the bloom gelatin to a just very low simmer. You can see that's kind of thick. And we don't want this to get very hot. We just need to give it a chance for, again, that magic hydrophilic mojo of the gelatin to soak up the water. And I like to get every little bit out of my Jello goodness, so I'm going to take some, pour it in my gelatin bowl, use that to make sure I get every little good bit I can, and make sure it goes into my medicine. So a couple of other things to consider before we serve this into separate containers. The first is, what other medicine would you like to add to your medicine that actually makes sense? So I'm going to be adding a little bit of lion's mane mushroom, and I just want to do this at the end when it's not too hot, just because lion's mane mushroom is really good for your brain. And it upregulates something called BDNF, or brain-derived neurotropic factor, which is typically low in winter. So if you're trying to study, learn, focus, I know in my case write books and things, having a little bit of that boost in the winter is actually just really good for your ability to focus, remember, and what's going on? Just kidding. So very quickly, if you are a person who's very sensitive to blood sugar for many reasons, you're trying to avoid it, and there's a lot of reasons to do that, you can get things like pomegranate powder, cranberry powders, raspberry, blackberry powders. They're kind of expensive, and depending on, I guess, how much of a sleuth you are on the internet, they're easier or harder to find. But they're often concentrated a little bit. Now, the tricky part with this is you don't know exactly how high the temperature is that they use to dry out the berries into powder. So you might have to, I don't know, spend some time finding out exactly the best kind. I'm kind of myself personally okay with a little bit of fruit once in a while, as long as I don't overdo it. So if you are trying to avoid fruit entirely, though, you could find source out some good fruit powders. You might have to find out the concentration of how many, say, tablespoons per liter of fluid to get the flavor you're looking for. But at least there's an option if you want to have almost zero sugars. There's still carbohydrates in the powder, but I think it's about 1/5 the carbohydrates of actual fruit. So 2 final ingredients, and then we're going to be ready to go. I like to use about 1/4 cup, 1/2 cup of organic lime juice, just for the extra vitamin C and that little bit of extra tartness, as well as it does add a slight amount of sweetness to it. And again, it's just more polyphenols and bioflavonoids and things that are just good for you and your cells and your DNA. Don't do this at home unless you're very sure of what you're doing, but I always like to make sure that the preparation I have is not so hot I can't hold my finger in there, so that I know that when I put the honey in there, which is unpasteurized raw, so I like my honey to be as organic and dark and unpasteurized and from the middle of, I guess, the forests of somewhere magical as I can. So depending on where you get honey, you can do that. If you don't like honey, or if you have reasons to avoid it, then make sure you're going to use something like maple syrup, or you could even use stevia as a sweet-like substitute, although for some people that doesn't work out very well either. I wouldn't recommend using any of the alcohol sugars like sorbitol and things like that, just because they tend to kind of throw your immune system off a little bit, and some people are actually profoundly allergic to them. So once things are cool, no problem. Then you can add your honey, and it's less likely to damage some of the living enzymes and antimicrobial things in honey, because honey can actually be used to treat certain infections. Sometimes I like to use licorice tea, and that's because the raspberries and licorice go really nicely together, and it also adds a slightly sweet, neutralizing flavor to all of the sharp, tart berries and lemon juice and camu camu and things like that. So we're almost ready. The next thing we want to do is to blend up all of these berries as much as we can. And this is a tricky thing for some people because the seeds in berries for some people can be triggering, especially for certain kind of autoimmune conditions, and especially for people with diverticulitis or diverticulosis. So for those people, seeds might not be a great idea. Having said that though, the seeds, especially raspberries and blackberry seeds, are the highest in the ellagic acid, which we want to activate the gelatin and the collagen to help our bodies heal and look and feel better. So that's again a personal thing about whether or not you want to play with that risk reward. You can strain them off, you're just losing a little bit of the benefit. I think it's safe to say, if you really enjoy food and cuisine, especially cooking for other people, that texture is one of those really subjective and personal things. Some people like crunch, some people hate it. And when it comes to making your Jello or Jello goodness, whether or not you want to have the herbal powders and especially the seeds from the raspberries and blackberries in your Jello is really important and up to you. Now, it's up to you in the sense of whether or not you want that in your mouth, but it's also up to you for another reason. The seeds, especially in raspberries and blackberries, are the part of the fruit that actually has the most ellagic acid. If we take them out of the Jello, then we're going to lose that benefit. So the first batch I'm going to make, I'm going to filter off everything that might be crunchy or lumpy or, texture, because for some people, ooh. If you're a person who absolutely is certain you want to strain all of this off every time you make it, then I would actually recommend cooking the berries, blending them up, straining them off before you add the gelatin, because the gelatin just slows down how long it takes to strain off the berries. So then we fill our jars. I'm using 250 milliliter or 1 cup mason jars. I reuse these a lot because I make this a lot, but you can use any other kind of container you like. So we'll get these in the fridge and then make the ones that are going to have that little bit of supplement boost on the bottom. So for those of us who want to eat the seeds and get all that camu camu and the lion's mane and anything else you might have added to your Jello goodness, we're just going to fill up our large measuring cup, fill these jars up, and then pour the rest into this baking pan so that we can make what's called sheet Jello. So here we go. And here we go. And we'll see what we can do with this tomorrow. And we'll see what we can do with this in another recipe video. And we'll see some of the things you can do with sheet Jello in another video. So let's put these all in the fridge and see what we've made. So before we look at and taste what we've made, please subscribe, like, share, ask a question, leave a comment. This is our first episode, but I would just love to hit the ground running with all that stuff, do all those things. If you're looking for any kind of support around Qigong meditation, breathwork, and mindfulness practice, you can find me at somadaoqigong.com. If you're looking for any kind of experienced blog material, research, and articles on complex autoimmune disease, you can find my other website for my clinic at allthingsautoimmunity.com. So let's take a look at what we've made. This is the Jello goodness that has been filtered a little bit so that you don't have to eat the seeds if you're trying to avoid the seeds. So it comes out looking just like that. And let's just have a little nibble here. I have this a lot, so I'm very familiar with it, and it tastes exactly the way it's supposed to. And it's not really sweet at all. And the thing you're going to probably notice the most if you've never had this before is it actually kind of coats your mouth because it's so enriching for your body. So here is the Jello goodness that has any kind of supplements, herbal powders, and all of the seeds that again are high in that ellagic acid. So let's see what that looks like. Again, that just makes it more of like a supplement tonic kind of Jello or Jello goodness than just the part that's meant to just nourish your tissues and membranes. Keep in mind that this recipe is kind of like a herbal formula in that it combines several different things like the collagen in the gelatin, the ellagic acid in the berries, all the polyphenols in the berries, which if you look into them, you're going to see that they're something your body needs in a regular way, especially if you're recovering from any kind of infection or any kind of chronic inflammatory condition. So sometimes it's important to look at things as more essential than perhaps we often think about them. So think of polyphenols and ellagic acid and collagen. For most people, especially recovering from a chronic illness, this is something your body actually needs. It's not something that's just maybe like just a good idea. It's a need. There's a lot of ginger in the one that has the layer on the bottom, which I happen to be a big fan of. And also, we have these two kinds of Jello goodness, plus the sheet Jello. So you can take this in, obviously because it's flat, cut it into different kind of shapes and sizes, and either add things like chocolate, or maybe sometimes we use coconut, shredded coconut or things like that, just to give it more texture, more flavor, and honestly the idea is to make it even more medicinally potent for your health and longevity. So thank you for coming to the Health and Longevity Kitchen, and again, I'm Dr. Michael Smith, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video.